In the year 2525, humanity had finally clawed its way to the stars. Space stations orbited distant moons, colonists eked out lives on harsh planets, and the Sol system was no longer the cage it had once been. Yet, for all humanity's advancements, Earth remained its fractured heart, a planet divided by old rivalries and uneasy alliances. That fragile equilibrium shattered when the signal arrived. It started as a ripple across the global communication networks, a pulse of energy that blanketed every channel simultaneously. It silenced broadcasts, crashed systems, and hijacked screens and displays worldwide. No one knew its origin, but everyone heard its message. It wasn't a voice or an image, but a repeating sequence of mathematical equations, alien in complexity yet strangely elegant. Buried within the equations was a single question that bypassed language and spoke directly to the mind. What is your purpose? The question reverberated through every corner of human society. Religious leaders proclaimed it a message from the divine. Scientists argued it was an extraterrestrial attempt at contact. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was an AI experiment gone rogue. Governments scrambled to decode the signal, their efforts hampered by paranoia and infighting. And in the streets, ordinary people grappled with the question on their own. What was humanity's purpose? At the United Terran Assembly headquarters in New Geneva, the debate raged. Some argued that humanity had no business answering such a question, that it was arrogant to assume they could comprehend the intent of a vastly superior intelligence. Others warned that ignoring the signal might be seen as an act of defiance. But one fact was undeniable. The signal wasn't local. Its source lay in the Andromeda Galaxy, 1.2 million light-years away, in a region devoid of any known celestial bodies. The decision was made. Humanity would answer. The Ardent, a state-of-the-art exploratory vessel equipped with experimental faster-than-light technology, was commissioned for the mission. Its objective: trace the signal to its source and uncover the truth. The crew would be humanity's best: scientists, engineers, soldiers, and diplomats. And at its helm, a captain who embodied both humanity's resilience and its scars. Captain Elias Voss was a man of contradictions. A war hero turned recluse, he had spent the last decade in self-imposed exile after a disastrous mission cost the lives of his closest comrades. Yet when the assembly summoned him, he answered the call, drawn not by duty, but by curiosity. The signal haunted him in a way he couldn't explain, as though it had been meant for him alone. As the Ardent prepared for departure, Earth buzzed with anticipation and fear. The signal's question lingered in the minds of billions, sparking debates, protests, and existential crises. Some saw the mission as humanity's greatest opportunity. Others viewed it as a dangerous gamble. But one thing was certain. Once the Ardent crossed the threshold into deep space, there would be no turning back. The stars outside the Ardent's observation decks stretched into streaks of light as the ship hurtled through the fabric of space-time. With every pulse of the engines, the crew felt the pull of uncharted regions, realms that no human had ever dared venture. Captain Elias Voss stood silently at the helm, his eyes fixed on the vast emptiness before them, the question of humanity's purpose gnawing at his thoughts. What are we really searching for? He wondered. The signal had lured them across the stars, but what awaited them at the end? The truth seemed elusive, slipping through his fingers with each passing day. Inside the command center, Dr. Adira Chen and Commander Idris Kane were at odds. The scientist, driven by a fierce curiosity, was obsessed with deciphering every fragment of the signal they had intercepted. The more she decoded, the more convinced she became that the signal was not just a message but an invitation, one that promised answers to the deepest questions of existence. She often found herself gazing at the holographic representations of the signal's complexity, as if hoping to uncover some hidden truth. Meanwhile, Commander Kane remained more skeptical. He had seen enough of humanity's darkest instincts during the wars that had shaped his past. The idea that an alien force, no matter how advanced, could hold the key to their survival troubled him. He believed in humanity's capacity to create its own destiny, free from the influence of unknown entities. "We're walking into a trap," Kane muttered one evening, pacing the command deck. "We don't know what we're dealing with." Yet, the ship pressed on, its course set for the heart of the unknown. As they traveled deeper into the uncharted void, the Ardent encountered strange phenomena that seemed designed to test their resolve. Powerful gravitational anomalies twisted the fabric of space-time, threatening to tear apart the ship. A rogue asteroid field appeared out of nowhere, forcing them into evasive maneuvers at the last moment. Captain Voss and his crew were no strangers to danger, but the challenges they faced were unlike any they had encountered before. Each day brought them closer to the source of the signal, and yet with each new obstacle, doubt began to creep in. The crew's morale was tested, with some starting to question whether they should turn back before it was too late. What if this is a warning? Lieutenant Araya Delgado, one of the ship's communications officers, voiced the concern that had begun to spread. What if the signal isn't meant for us? What if we're not meant to find this place? Voss turned to her, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. "We've come too far to turn back now," he said, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "We'll see this through." The ship pushed forward, into the heart of darkness. Then, one day, a strange transmission crackled over the ship's comms, cutting through the silence. The words were simple but chilling. "You have come. Now you will face what is next." No source could be traced. No signal matched anything they had encountered before. It was as if the void itself had spoken. For a moment, the crew froze, a collective shudder running through them. The abyss had watched them, and now it was waiting for their next move. After weeks of tension and perilous travel through the abyss of space, the Ardent finally arrived at its destination, a location not marked on any star charts, an anomaly that defied all logic. The ship's sensors detected an enormous, dark structure, its sheer size impossible to fully comprehend. A perfect, angular shape floated silently in the vacuum. A monolith, its surface slick and impenetrable, gleaming with an otherworldly aura. It was not just an object, but a presence, an entire system, vast beyond anything humanity had encountered. The monolith seemed to hum with a low, resonating frequency, as though it was alive. Its edges seemed to warp the fabric of space itself, bending light and energy around it in strange, unpredictable ways. "We've found it," Captain Voss said quietly, his voice tinged with awe. He had led his crew through unimaginable dangers, but now, in front of this alien monument, his heart raced with uncertainty. What was this structure? What had created it? And why had it sent the signal that had drawn them here? Dr. Adira Chen was the first to speak. This is not natural. It can't be." She was glued to the data streams, watching the unfiltered readings as they flooded in. The structure was ancient, far older than anything known to human science. Its design was a puzzle of perfect geometry, completely at odds with the chaotic nature of the universe around it. "This is the source of the signal. There's no question about it." The crew had no choice but to approach. The Ardent's engines powered down, and they coasted slowly toward the monolith, which appeared to extend outward into infinity. The ship's hull trembled slightly as they drew closer, as if the monolith was exerting an unseen force on them. The ship's instruments began to behave erratically, unable to reconcile the structure's presence with their understanding of physics. Captain Voss ordered the crew to prepare for an extended stay, and they set about analyzing the monolith's surface. There was no obvious point of entry, no hatch or door, only a smooth, impenetrable exterior. But then a pattern appeared. The surface shifted, glowing faintly, and an indentation emerged. It was as if the monolith had sensed their approach and was now acknowledging their presence. Dr. Chen was practically vibrating with excitement as she adjusted the ship's external scanners. "Look, it's responding. The surface, it's displaying something. Data, language, symbols." Suddenly, the monolith's surface split open, forming a door-like opening large enough for the Ardent to dock. The crew exchanged nervous glances. No one knew what lay beyond. But this was the culmination of their journey, the reason they had come. They had to enter. The hatch slid open, and a deep, hollow sound reverberated through the ship as the atmosphere inside the monolith began to shift. The Ardent's crew donned their spacesuits and cautiously disembarked into the void, stepping into the monolith's vast interior. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, an endless hallway of shifting geometries, vast chambers that seemed to stretch beyond space and time. Then came the voices. At first, it was faint, a whispering hum, barely perceptible. Then it grew louder, more insistent. It was not a language, but a series of tonal vibrations, resonating with the minds of the crew. Each voice seemed to address a different person, piercing deep into their consciousness. The monolith was communicating, but it was not speaking. It was imprinting. Captain Voss felt the pressure in his mind as the voices bombarded him with questions, challenges, and images of his past, his failures, his victories, his regrets. It was overwhelming, but he steeled himself. He had led his people this far. He would not falter now. And then, through the chaos of alien voices, one phrase stood out, clear and direct. "You have come. Now you will face what is next." The message had no answer. It only asked for their next move. The air inside the monolith's core was thick, charged with an energy that hummed through the bones of every crew member. The voices had faded, but their presence lingered in the minds of the crew, each of them still feeling the weight of their unspoken questions. Captain Voss stood at the forefront, his mind racing, but his demeanor calm, an outward facade of control. The opening of the monolith had only been the beginning. What lay ahead was unknown, but something in his gut told him that the real test had just begun. Dr. Chen was already at the ship's data terminal, her fingers dancing across holographic screens, decoding the remaining patterns that flickered in the air around them. The structure's internal environment isn't just passive, she muttered to herself. It's alive, reactive. It's waiting for us to engage. Before she could finish, the monolith's massive doors sealed behind them, trapping them inside. The floor beneath them shifted and began to hum, sending ripples through the air. The hum became a low growl, and suddenly, the ground before them began to twist, forming intricate pathways of light. A voice, no longer a whisper but an authoritative tone, echoed through their minds. "Prove your worth. Pass the trials, or leave. But know this, if you fail, you will be lost to the void, as countless others before you." There was no turning back. The crew stood motionless, watching as the light pathways expanded into a vast arena. The walls seemed to stretch out of sight, a dizzying expanse of interwoven structures that gave no hint as to where they led. Without warning, the floor beneath them began to move, and the crew found themselves separated by a force beyond their control. Voss was pulled toward the center of the arena, and the rest of the crew was scattered to different parts of the labyrinthine interior. The monolith had set them on different paths that would test their minds, their bodies, and their very souls. For Voss, the trial was immediate and personal. He found himself standing alone on a battlefield, the distant screams of soldiers echoing in the air. The scene unfolded like a memory, one he knew too well. The heat of battle, the chaos, the mistakes. This was not a place of imagination. It was his greatest failure, replayed in cruel detail. He could hear the voices of his fallen comrades, their final words haunting him, accusing him of cowardice. His hands trembled as he stood in front of the remnants of the battle, the wreckage of his decisions, a battlefield drenched in the blood of those who had trusted him. "If you are to lead again, Captain," the voice inside his head whispered, "you must choose. Will you save them, or will you sacrifice them for a greater victory?" The choice tore at him. In his previous life, he had chosen the greater victory, but it had cost him everything. Now, faced with the same decision in a new form, the question was impossible to answer. But there was no time to dwell. Voss knew that whatever the monolith required, It would not let him escape until he had made his choice. Back in the distant chambers, Dr. Chen faced a trial of her own. She was immersed in a vision of a future where humanity had ascended to the stars, elevated, enlightened, perfect. But the price of perfection was evident. To achieve this utopia, humanity had sacrificed its free will, its diversity of thought, its very identity. Dr. Chen was torn. Should humanity seek a higher existence, one free of conflict and suffering, or embrace the chaos and uncertainty that had made them who they were? Commander Kane was thrown into a simulation of the Earth's collapse, a world on the brink of extinction, ravaged by war and famine. In this vision, no force could stop the inevitable decline. Humanity, divided by greed and pride, faced certain destruction. But Kane saw something. Someone offering a different path. A single decision, a single action, could change the outcome. And so the trials continued, each path grueling, each test a reflection of their deepest fears and desires. The monolith was not just testing their strength, it was testing the very essence of what it meant to be human. You have come. Now, make your choice, the voice echoed again. The crew had been scattered, but they would not remain lost for long. The monolith was a mirror, reflecting back at them the very core of their humanity. To succeed, they would have to face themselves and survive. As the trials raged on, the monolith's vast interior seemed to shift with every step the crew took, its infinite halls stretching endlessly into unknown dimensions. Each crew member found themselves isolated in a different corner of this mysterious structure, and every trial they faced grew more intense. They were not just fighting for their lives. They were battling for their very essence. But despite the personal horrors they faced, they were driven by the same singular question. What was the true purpose of humanity? In the heart of the monolith, Captain Voss had made his choice. He had saved his comrades this time, defying the cruel calculus of sacrifice that had defined his past. But the battlefield, his greatest failure, did not fade. The voices of the fallen continued to echo in his mind. You are not done, they whispered. You have not yet proven yourself. As Voss struggled to comprehend the meaning of his trial, he stumbled upon a hidden chamber, a vast, empty hall, devoid of anything but silence. It was here that the monolith revealed its next revelation. The walls of the chamber shifted, forming holographic images of a long-dead species, the Architects. They were a race unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. Tall, translucent beings made of shifting, crystalline energy, their bodies constantly evolving. Their civilization, ancient beyond belief, had mastered technology far surpassing humanity's wildest dreams. But their purpose, what they had sought above all else, was elusive. The holograms flickered and distorted, revealing a civilization that had once held the answers to the most profound questions of existence. Yet, as Voss watched, it became clear that the Architects had fallen into ruin. Their greatest strength, their drive for knowledge, had become their undoing. They had sought to perfect the universe, to find a purpose so absolute that it would transcend all flaws. But in their quest, they had fractured, split into factions, and ultimately destroyed themselves. A voice echoed within the chamber, a soft, mournful sound that seemed to originate from all around Voss. We sought answers to the eternal question, but we were wrong. We believed that knowledge was the key to everything. But in the end, it was our hubris that destroyed us. Dr. Chen, meanwhile, found herself in another chamber, this one lined with the remnants of the Architects' technology. Ancient consoles, now dark and useless, flickered with static. As she examined the broken systems, the air around her seemed to vibrate with unseen energy, and the voice of the Architects reached her mind as well. You too are seeking answers, but what will they cost you? The monolith, it seemed, was not just an artifact. It was a remnant of a species that had once been like them, a species that had reached for the stars only to be consumed by their own search for perfection. Chen couldn't help but wonder, was this our future? Then, the truth began to surface. The monolith, like the architects, was not just a tool. It was a living entity, a consciousness that had borne witness to the rise and fall of countless civilizations, each one destroyed by the same desire to find a singular truth, to impose meaning on an inherently chaotic universe. "We were the architects of our own destruction," the voice whispered, and Voss felt a shiver run down his spine. "But you are different. You can choose a path we could not." In that moment, Voss realized something that had eluded him since they first encountered the monolith. The signal, the trials, the relentless questioning. It was all a test, not of their knowledge or strength, but of their ability to choose. The architects had failed because they had been consumed by a single, unyielding vision of purpose. Humanity, for all its flaws, had the power to choose a different way. The monolith wasn't offering a solution. It was challenging them to forge their own. As the trial continued, the crew members found themselves face to face with the ghosts of the architects, holograms of their fallen civilization, urging them to decide. Would humanity become like the architects, devoured by their own search for meaning? Or would they embrace the uncertainty of the future, knowing that their greatest strength lay in their ability to adapt, to change, and to survive? The choice was theirs to make, but the consequences would be immense. The monolith pulsed with a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm. It was as if it had been waiting for them to reach this point, a moment of decision that would not be rushed. The crew, each faced with their own trial, felt the weight of the choices laid before them. The words of the architects, their final, cryptic message, echoed in their minds. "You can choose a path we could not. What will you decide?" Captain Voss stood in the center of the vast chamber, the images of the architect's downfall still vivid in his mind. He had been chosen to lead humanity into the unknown. But the true test of leadership wasn't about victory. It was about knowing when to let go, when to accept that control was an illusion. The architects had failed because they had sought perfection in a universe that would never offer it. His hands clenched into fists as he faced the holographic echoes of the architects. "Will you choose our path?" one of the figures asked. "Will you lead humanity into perfection, or will you break free and face the chaos?" For a moment, Voss hesitated. The chaos had led humanity to war, to suffering, to failure. But it had also led them to triumph. It had given them the ability to adapt, to change, to rise again, no matter how many times they had fallen. Perfection was a lie. True strength came from embracing imperfection. Outside the chamber, Dr. Chen, Commander Kane, and the rest of the crew were still struggling with their own trials. The trial was not just about surviving the challenges they faced. It was about confronting their deepest fears and desires, the ghosts of their pasts that haunted them. Dr. Chen found herself face to face with the same question the architects had faced in their final days. What is the price of perfection? She had always believed that knowledge could bring humanity to a better future, that science and reason could solve any problem. But here, within the heart of the monolith, she saw the consequences of that belief. The architects had achieved near godlike power, but they had lost themselves in their pursuit of an unattainable ideal. The vision of a perfect future for humanity, one without conflict, without suffering, flickered before her eyes. But it was a hollow future, a future where free will was sacrificed in exchange for control. Could humanity, could she, truly accept such a future where everything was planned, where every action was dictated by logic and reason, leaving no room for the messy, unpredictable beauty of human life? Commander Kane's trial was different, though no less personal. He found himself back on Earth, in the dying moments of his home planet. The sky was dark, torn apart by storms and fire, the air thick with smoke. Humanity had fractured, divided by greed and fear. As the last remnants of civilization crumbled around him, Kane stood in the middle of a ruined city, the echoes of human failure all around him. But then a light appeared, someone, or something, offering a solution. It was a chance to change everything, to rewrite the future. The catch was simple. It would require sacrifice, a cost that might be too high for humanity to bear. Kane struggled with the choice. He had seen the depths of human depravity, but he had also seen humanity's potential for greatness. Could one man, one action, truly change the course of history? Or would he be just another cog in the machine, another failed attempt to save the world? The monolith, alive and watching, was waiting for them to decide. It offered no answers, only the mirror of their own desires, fears, and doubts. The crew could not escape the trials they faced. They could only face them, confront their pasts, and make a choice. Voss's voice broke through the silence. We choose to embrace the chaos. We will carve our own path, not one dictated by perfection or fear. The monolith's response was immediate. The holograms of the architects flickered, their mournful expressions fading into nothingness. The structure seemed to hum with a quiet approval, the energy within the walls shifting. You have chosen. The voice of the monolith echoed. And now, your true journey begins. The trials were over, but the path forward was still unclear. The crew had passed the test, but the future of humanity now rested on their shoulders, as it always had. The monolith's message was simple. The choice was never about perfection. It was about freedom. The silence that followed their decision was profound. The crew of the Ardent stood in the heart of the monolith's vast chamber, each of them still processing the weight of the trials they had faced. The voice of the monolith had faded, but the echoes of its words lingered in the air. They had chosen to embrace the chaos, to carve their own path through the unknown. And yet, even with the trials behind them, a new sense of unease hung in the air, a sense that the monolith was not finished with them. The ship's sensors began to flicker, as if reacting to their decision. Something was happening, something beyond their understanding. It's shifting, Dr. Chen said, her voice barely a whisper. She was the first to notice the change. The walls of the monolith, once smooth and unyielding, were beginning to hum with energy, the air around them thickening with a low, resonating pulse. The floor beneath them seemed to move, as if the very structure was alive, aware of their presence. It's changing. The monolith. It's awakening. Captain Voss turned to her, his brow furrowed. What do you mean, awakening? We've already faced its trials. Dr. Chen shook her head, her gaze still fixed on the shifting walls. This isn't just a structure. It's something more. It's reacting to our choice. The crew exchanged wary glances, each of them sensing that they were on the precipice of something far more significant than they had realized. The monolith had not merely tested them. It had been watching, waiting for them to decide. And now it was responding. The light around them intensified, the once subtle hum becoming a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to rattle their very bones. And then, suddenly, the monolith's walls parted, revealing a colossal chamber at its center. The space was vast, far larger than anything they had encountered so far, filled with swirling energy and shimmering lights. At the center of this new chamber was a massive sphere, glowing with a soft, pulsating light. It was as if the heart of the monolith itself had been revealed. The sphere seemed to draw them in, its energy both inviting and intimidating. It was not just a physical object. It was a living entity, pulsating with knowledge and power beyond comprehension. What is it? Commander Kane asked, his voice barely audible in the heady air. He had seen many things in his time, wars, tragedies, and the depths of human depravity. But this was something different. The sphere was not just a relic of an ancient race. It was a source of untapped potential. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her curiosity getting the better of her. It's the heart of the monolith, the source of its power. The architects must have created it, an artificial intelligence, perhaps, or a living consciousness that contains all the knowledge of their civilization. The sphere pulsed again, its light intensifying. The crew could feel it in their minds, a strange presence brushing against their thoughts. The monolith had not simply been a test. It had been a conduit, a vessel for something far more powerful. Then the voice of the monolith returned, its tone no longer a question but a statement. You have chosen. Now the gift of the architects is yours to wield. But be warned, with great power comes great cost. Choose wisely, for what you awaken may change everything. The crew stood frozen in place, each of them aware of the gravity of the moment. The monolith had given them its answer, but it had also given them a choice. What they did next would shape the fate of humanity, for better or worse. There was no turning back. Captain Voss stepped forward, his resolve clear. We were never meant to be perfect, but we were meant to survive and to build our own future. The sphere pulsed once more, its light expanding into every corner of the chamber. The monolith had awakened, and now it was waiting for humanity's next step. The chamber trembled as the sphere's light grew ever more intense, its pulse reverberating through the walls of the monolith. The crew stood before it, their hearts racing. The presence of the monolith, alive and conscious, pressed against their minds, a weight that was both terrifying and exhilarating. They had reached the final stage of their journey, and the choice before them was one that would define the future of humanity. Captain Voss stood at the forefront, his gaze fixed on the glowing sphere. He could feel the power emanating from it, a power that promised to reshape everything they knew about existence. The monolith had offered them a gift, but the weight of the warning that accompanied it could not be ignored. With great power comes great cost. The voice of the monolith had said, "Choose wisely, for what you awaken may change everything." For a moment, Voss's mind raced. The temptation was immense. They had seen the power of the architects, their once great civilization, now shattered. The monolith had been the pinnacle of their achievement, a vessel of knowledge and technology beyond anything humanity could comprehend. But it had come at a price. Their search for perfection had led them to their downfall, their inability to adapt to the chaos of existence, the very thing that had doomed them. But humanity was different. Humanity was not bound by the same rigid pursuit of perfection. They were flawed, yes, but in their flaws lay their strength. They had fought and struggled for every inch of progress they had made. And now, standing before the monolith, Voss realized that this was not just a choice for power, it was a choice for freedom. "We are not the architects," Voss said, his voice steady and resolute. "We will not let ourselves be consumed by the pursuit of perfection. We will build our own future, a future where we are free to make mistakes, to learn, and to grow." Dr. Chen, standing beside him, nodded. She had seen the truth of their situation, the allure of the perfect world the monolith offered. But she had also seen the dangers of that perfection. The architects had become prisoners of their own creation, their society collapsing under the weight of their desire to control everything. Humanity could not afford to make the same mistake. Commander Kane's hand hovered near his sidearm, his eyes scanning the sphere. He was a soldier, and soldiers understood the cost of every decision. This was no different. Whatever power the monolith offered, he knew that it would change the course of history. But was that power worth the price? He looked to Voss, the captain who had led them to this moment, and found his answer in the captain's unwavering conviction. "We can't let fear of the unknown dictate our future," Kane said. "The architects were lost because they couldn't accept uncertainty. We must embrace it. Humanity's strength lies in our ability to adapt, to evolve, not in seeking an ideal we can never reach." The monolith seemed to respond to their words, the sphere's light pulsing softly, as though it were considering their decision. The air around them crackled with energy, and for a moment, the crew felt a strange sense of peace settle over them. The choice had been made. Suddenly, the voice of the monolith boomed, resonating deep within their minds. "You have chosen the path of uncertainty. The future you seek will not be without hardship, but it will be your own. The power of the architects is now yours to wield, but remember, it is a tool, not a weapon. Use it wisely, or it will destroy you as it destroyed us." The sphere flared brightly, sending a shockwave of energy through the chamber. The crew braced themselves, but the energy was not destructive. Instead, it seemed to infuse them with knowledge, a deep, profound understanding of the monolith's secrets, the ancient power that had shaped countless civilizations. They were not just inheriting the architect's legacy, they were forging their own. As the light began to fade, the monolith's power ebbed, leaving behind a profound silence. The sphere, once an overwhelming force, now stood dormant. The crew had survived the trials, faced their deepest fears, and chosen a path of freedom and uncertainty. They had passed the test, not because they had proven themselves perfect, but because they had embraced their flaws and learned to navigate them. Voss turned to his crew, his voice full of determination. "We've been given the gift of the future. Let's make sure we build one worth having." The monolith, its trials completed, had awakened. Now, humanity's true journey would begin. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with both peril and possibility. But for the first time in history, humanity had the power to choose its own path, free from the constraints of perfection, free from the ghosts of the past. It was theirs to shape.